what is being done right now is putting into place a plan that has anti-Semitism as a justification in the first place, but really goes far beyond that. To paraphrase J.D. Vance, take over or destroy these institutions. These are the words that he used in a podcast conversation 4 years ago. That was the goal, take over or destroy.
Let's talk about Middle East, South Asian, and African studies at Columbia. Let's talk about the curriculum, about the teaching of history, global affairs, politics, critical studies, and whatnot. A part of, you said circular firing squad, and I assume you're referring to the conflict between administration and faculty over the governance of the university in the face of these external pressures. Among the demands coming from the Trump administration to Columbia University is an insistence that the Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies Department be under new governance to presumably correct for, I can put quotes around these words, the biases in the way that they teach their classes and do their scholarship. It looks like Columbia's administration, Katrina Armstrong and the board, are going to capitulate, I just read in the newspaper this morning, to the administration's demands in this respect. And I would imagine that there would be a lot of consternation in Columbia's faculty about this capitulation as a surrendering of academic freedom and the autonomy, the intellectual autonomy of the university to external political pressures. And I'm just wondering, do I get that right? And what's going on in these early days after the announcement of the capitulation?
You're right on both counts, about the capitulation and about the consternation. So with regard to the capitulation, it's not just the demand to put the MISAS department, the Middle Eastern, South Asian, African Studies department, into receivership. That was the demand made by the federal agencies as a precondition for beginning a conversation about restoring the funding that Columbia had lost. But that was not the only demand. There were many other demands. Included in them, among those demands was a demand that the public safety officers have the power to arrest and remove students from campus, that the judicial board be disbanded effectively, that admissions policies be changed, and so on. There's a long list of demands. And there's been capitulation, if you like. I just wrote a post this morning about this, and it'll be interesting to see whether it will be seen eventually as capitulation or strategic retreat. Let me explain that in a second. But
this is your lion roaring post? I think I read that before we signed on.
I just posted it maybe an hour ago. That's right. Yeah, the lion hath roared. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of demands that are made by the administration. Let me step back a little bit and talk about the initial denial of funding, the $400 million in grants and contracts that was canceled. And the justification for that was the inability or unwillingness of the university to take action against the harassment of Jewish students on campus. So it was anti-Semitism was the justification for the freezing of the funds.
Right.
That was 2 weeks ago. The president of Columbia, President Armstrong, responded with a statement that outlined a series of steps that Columbia had already taken and that was strengthening to combat anti-Semitism on campus. And in that statement, described the eradication of anti-Semitism as her number one priority. So that was the response to the cancellation of funds. Now, in response to that response, the federal agencies came back with this set of demands that you just mentioned. The public safety officers, the admissions policy, the MISAS department, receivership, and so on and so forth, a whole bunch of demands. And basically said that Columbia had a week to respond to this letter. And this was a precondition for any conversation about the restoration of funding. So it was a very hard-nosed response. And the reason I mention this history, going back 2 weeks, is precisely because of what we had discussed earlier, that what's happening to higher education was imagined and conceived 4 years ago, before there was any hint of encampments or protests. They were before October 7th, in fact. So what is being done right now is putting into place a plan that, that has anti-Semitism as a justification in the first place, but really goes far beyond that in terms of to paraphrase J.D. Vance, take over or destroy these institutions. These are the words that he used in a podcast conversation 4 years ago. Right, that was the goal: take over or destroy. And what has been done, what President Armstrong has done in her reply, is to basically concede to every single one of these demands. She does it using the language of being true to the university's mission and values. So the statement is couched in terms of consistency with mission and values, but if you go down the list of demands, you'll see that every single one of them has been met to some degree. One that actually concerns me quite a lot, which hasn't gotten much attention, is the definition of anti-Semitism. This is really interesting issue, because many people across the ideological spectrum, including Chris Rufo, whom we discussed a while ago, are quite opposed to using this particular definition, which claims that the application of double standards to Israel is itself anti-Semitic.
We can link to this. This is the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition of anti-Semitism, which comes with a set of examples that illustrate anti-Semitism that people are objecting to because the examples could be conceived as inconsistent with freedom of expression.
That's exactly right. So people who care about freedom of expression, and I got to give credit to some people who are very strong defenders of Israel, including Eli Lake, who have recently made very strong statements opposed, for example, to the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil.
I'm very glad to hear that. I didn't know that Eli Lake had spoken to
this. This was a very, very outspoken statement on X.
I'll look it up.
And he says you should. Yeah, it'll be worth linking to it. And he says, and he finds this person abhorrent, as you can imagine, given what you know about Eli Lake. But he says that unless he's convicted, unless he's charged with and convicted of a crime, this is very un-American. What's being done is very un-American. And he's not the only one. There are many, many people actually on the American right who are very, very uncomfortable with this way of handling ideas that they find unpalatable.